So total utility is influenced by several factors. So total utility has many factors. One of the factors is the preference, consumer preference, that is what we like, our likes and our dislikes. So Inechi has a preference, Clifford has a preference, I also have a preference. Our preference sometimes may not be the same. So that is one of the what? One of the factors that determine your total utility, your preference, also the quantity that you consume. How many can you consume? So if we are to take Coke now, Clifford can decide to say, okay, he want to take 10 bottles. I can decide to say I want to take 5 bottles. And she can say she can only take 2 bottles. So the quantity that we consume are not the same. So that is, if I can take 1 bottle of Coke and it's okay for me, you can decide to take 3 bottles of Coke before you can satisfy. So our satisfaction is not the same. Our utility is not equal. And again, another factor is the characteristics of the goods or the service itself. Some goods has much factor than another. So for example now, I can decide to say, okay, I want to use an Android phone. People can say, you know, he doesn't like Android phone, that he prefer using an iPhone. So the characteristics, the features of all of these goods will determine our utility. So as consumer consumes more units of a goods or services, the more you consume, the more utility you derive. So if you are consuming more, your utility will increase, and this will reflect additional satisfaction from taking additional units. However, the rate at which total utility increase may diminish as the consumer consume more units, reflecting the law of diminishing marginal utility. So what we are saying is that the more you take more, the more you consume more, the lesser your satisfaction. Please, can you confirm that you can hear me, please? I want you to be sure you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Okay, so what we are saying is that the more you consume a goods, the less your satisfaction. So what we are saying is that, for instance, if I will still be using Coke as a case study. So if I'm to take 1 bottle of Coke, for instance, the moment that I take one, I take another one to use. Because Clifford, is it possible for one person to drink 1 crate of Coke? Do you think it's possible?
Sorry, I didn't even hear what you said. I don't know if it's my
Hello?
network or it's your
Do you think it's
network.
possible for one person to take 1 crate, that is 24 bottles of a Coke?
I think it's my network. Please
Okay, can you
just
hear me now?
kindly recap. Yes, I can hear you. Kindly recap.
Okay, so I said that the more you consume a commodity or product, the less the quantity you can take, it will be reducing. So what I'm saying, I'm not giving a case study. I said, have you seen someone that can take 1 crate of Coke? That is 24 bottles. Do you think anyone can take that?
No, no, no.
Okay. Like let's use you as a case study. How many bottles do you
Is it my network?
I think it's his network because I can't hear him too.
Ah,
can take? Let's be realistic now.
sir, your network is actually bad.
Please, can you confirm that you can hear me, please?
Yes, I can hear you.
So sorry about the network. So I was trying to rejoin, so it's not connecting. So let's continue, please. So I was saying earlier on, before the disconnection, that we're talking about total utility. Total utility is the maximum satisfaction that we derive from taking a commodity. And I said that the quantity that we can take will increase at the first stage initially, but the more we continue to take more, the more we take, the less the quantity that we can take, it will reduce. So what I'm saying is that if you take one bottle of Coke, so the satisfaction you will derive will reduce when you take another one again. So meaning that it will get to a point whereby you won't be able to take anything again. That is what we call additional satisfaction. So we call it law of diminishing marginal utility. We call it law of diminishing marginal utility. That is, the more you take, the less your satisfaction will increase. So when we talk about total utility is equal to utility 1, that is U1. This is U1, that is utility 1 plus utility 2 plus U3 plus U4 and continuously like that. So that is how to calculate total utility. So the more you take, the less your utility. So where TU is total utility, and U1, U2, U3 that we mentioned there, they are utility that is obtained from consuming each unit of the goods or services. So total utility is important in consumer theory because it provides insight into how changes in consumption affect other satisfaction. So it helps economists to understand consumer preference, demand behavior, consumer welfare. Additionally, total utility is often used in conjunction with marginal utility. So when we're talking about total utility, we cannot separate marginal utility from total utility. So let's move on to concept of marginal utility. Concept of marginal utility. So marginal utility is the additional satisfaction or benefit that a consumer derives from consuming one unit of a goods or services. So when we talk about marginal utility is the extra. Please, can you hear me? Marginal utility is the extra unit that we consume. So unlike that of total utility is the aggregate of the utility that we can that we derive from taking a commodity. So when we now talk about marginal utility is after you must have attained total utility. So the extra that you take, the extra units that you take is what we refer to as what? Marginal utility. So when we're talking about marginal utility, you can also say it represents the change. It represents the change in total utility resulting from consuming an additional unit of what? Of goods or services. So that is what we classify as what? Marginal utility. That is the change in total utility that you result from taking additional unit. So what I'm saying is that when I'm talking about marginal utility, we are talking about a situation whereby you've already taken the maximum you can take, which is total utility. So any additional take is referred to as marginal utility. So what are the more units of goods or services? The additional satisfaction gained from each additional unit decreases. In other words, marginal utility typically decrease as consumption what? Increase. So what I'm saying is that the more you take, the less your what? Utility. So when you consume more, your satisfaction will what? Your marginal utility will decrease. That is what we call diminishing marginal utility. Then we also have negative marginal utility. In rare cases, consuming an additional unit of goods or service may actually reduce the consumer total utility. So what we are saying is that in a situation where we have negative marginal utility, so if you consume additional unit of a goods, it will reduce your total utility. So this occurs when negative effect of consuming more of the goods or service outweigh the positive effect. So how do we calculate marginal utility? Marginal utility can be calculated as the change in total utility divided by the change in quantity consumed. Please, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, this is the formula for calculating marginal utility. This is the formula for calculating marginal utility. This thing I showed here is called, we call it change. We call it change. This thing is called change. So we call it change in total utility all over change in what? Quantity. Change in quantity consumed. So if you are asked in exam, or you are asked to calculate marginal utility. So the formula for calculating marginal utility is change in total utility all over change in quantity consumed. Please take note of that. So where your MU represents marginal utility, I repeat again, this is called change in total utility all over change in quantity. So please take note of that. So where your change in TU, we call it change, this is referred to as change in total utility, while this is change in quantity. So the next one is consumer equilibrium. What is consumer equilibrium? In consumer theory, consumers tend to allocate their resources in such a way that the marginal utility per dollar spent is equal across all goods and services. This condition known as consumer equilibrium helps consumers to maximize their total utility given their budget constraint. So when I'm talking about consumer equilibrium, we are talking about a situation whereby consumers are able to meet their what? Their demand, and consumers are able to derive satisfaction from taking a commodity. So that is what we are calling consumer equilibrium. That is a situation whereby you derive equal utility from taking a commodity. So let's move on to the law of diminishing marginal utility. Law of diminishing marginal utility. The law of diminishing marginal utility is a fundamental concept in economics that states that as a consumer consumes more units of a goods or services, the additional satisfaction or utility derived from each additional unit decreases, all things being equal. So I've explained it before. The law of diminishing marginal utility states that as a consumer, the more you consume more units of a goods, the additional satisfaction you derive will reduce. So for example, like I said earlier on, that if you are drinking one bottle of Coke now, if you finish one bottle, you take another bottle again. So that additional one that you take will begin to reduce your utility. As it you get to a point whereby you won't be able to take another one, you won't be able to consume more again. That is what we call diminishing utility. That is, the more you consume a unit of a commodity, the lesser your what? Your satisfaction. That is, the less quantity you'll be able to take again. That is what we refer to as law of diminishing marginal utility. So what are the key points that you should take note in this law? Number one is decreasing marginal utility. Decreasing marginal utility. So the law suggests that each additional unit of a goods or services provide less additional satisfaction. So we are still saying the same thing. So the more units they take, the less your what? The lesser your what? The lesser quantity you'll be able to consume, you'll be able to take. So that is that. Then you also have another key factor again, it is subjective nature. It has a subjective nature. So marginal utility is subjective. and varies from person to person. So marginal utility varies from person. That is, I am what I can take. We can be taking the same coke, for instance now. So the more with the bottle I can take will be the same thing with the bottle you can take. The bottle you can take will not also be the same thing with the bottle that Inechi can take. So that is what one individual finds satisfying, another may not. So if, like I've said this thing time without number, that if I can take 5 bottles of Coke, for example, and I can say yes, I'm okay. It does not necessarily mean that you two should take the same 5 before you are okay. You can decide to take just 2 and you derive your own satisfaction. And then she can say, okay, fine, she wants to take 10 bottles before she can derive her own satisfaction. So our satisfaction is not equal, may not be the same. So the rate of our marginal utility diminishes, as it differs. They are not the same. Another one again is that consumer choice. So like I've always said that we all have different choice. So the law of diminishing marginal utility helps to explain consumer behavior and choice. That is, through utility, we can explain how consumer behave and how consumer make their what? Their choices. So consumers typically allocate their limited resources, that is their income, in such a way as to maximize their total utility. As the utility of a good decreases with each additional unit consumed, consumers will eventually reach a point where they are indifferent between consuming more of that goods or allocating their resources towards other goods with higher marginal utility. So what we are saying in summary under this consumer choice is that if we make a decision, that is, don't forget I've explained scale of preference before. So from our scale of preference, we make a choice. So when we make a choice, we need to understand that by making a choice, by deciding to take a particular commodity, for example, Coke as a case study now, if you decide to take Coke, the satisfaction you derive from taking Coke may not be the same as the same satisfaction you derive from taking what? American, or let me say big cola. So the fact that they are of the same taste, so it does not mean that you derive the same satisfaction from it. So you make your choice based on what suits you, based on what utility that you derive. And again, some goods will not give you the utility you want. So that is why you need to make your choice carefully. So another one again is optimal consumption. So rational consumer aim to maximize their total utility subject to their budget. So that is, your income level will determine your what? Your consumption. Even in a situation whereby you feel like you can take 3 bottles, you can take 4 bottles. That is not really the issue. But the issue now is that, do you have the resources to meet that demand? Do you have the resources that can satisfy your utility? So another one again is implications for market demand. The law of diminishing marginal utility has implication for market demand. As the price of a good decreases, consumers may be willing to purchase more of it. So that is when the price begin to decrease. So consumers will respond to, that is law of demand. So when the price fall, demand will what? Will increase. So consumers will be willing to buy more, up to the point where the marginal utility equals the price. So the more the price begin to fall, consumer will be willing to what? To buy more. And as they are willing to buy more, it will get to a situation whereby their marginal utility will be equal. This means consumers are less willing to pay the price for additional units. So another one again is exceptions and special cases. While the law of diminishing marginal utility generally holds true, there can be exceptions and special cases. For example, goods that are complementary to each other might not exhibit diminishing marginal utility when they are consumed together. So what we are saying is that when goods that are complementary, so what are complementary goods? I say complementary goods are goods whereby without one, the other one cannot be used. For example, like we said, bread and butter. So when you consume, you can't consume one. That is, you cannot derive satisfaction from taking only one. But when you take the two together. For example, like I said, bread and butter. If you decide to take only butter, you can't derive satisfaction. But when you take goods that are complementary together, like bread and butter, you derive your satisfaction from taking it when you consume them together. So if you take one, that is why we say that it might not exhibit diminishing marginal utility when consumed together. So when you consume them together, your utility will begin to work to increase, unlike when you take only one itself. So let's move on to our next slide. So any question before I proceed? Ineji, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
So at this junction, do you have any question before we continue?
No question. Please go on.
Okay, so thank you. So we have the indifference curve. We have indifference curve. So what is indifference curve? The indifference curve theory is a concept in microeconomics used to analyze consumer preferences and choices. It was developed to explain how consumers make decisions when faced with trade-offs between different goods or services. So what is indifference curve? It is used in microeconomics. Don't forget I mentioned earlier on, I think when we started class, that was in our chapter 1, I mentioned that we have branches of economics. We have microeconomics and we also have macroeconomics. So one of the tools that is used to analyze consumer preference and choices is indifference curve. And this indifference curve was developed to explain how consumers make decisions when they are faced with trade-offs between different goods or services. Trade-off means decision whereby price of goods are what? Are what? Are fluctuating, that is, they are not stable. So we have, what are the components of indifference curve? Number one is indifference curve is a graphical representation showing all combinations of two goods that provide the consumer with the same level of satisfaction or utility. So indifference curve is a graph that shows all combinations of two goods that provides what? The consumer with what? With the same level of satisfaction. With the same level of satisfaction. So we also have again diminishing marginal rate of substitution. Diminishing marginal rate of substitution. So the slope of an indifference curve, known as the marginal rate of substitution, it represents the rate at which the consumer is willing to trade one good for another while maintaining the same level of satisfaction. So when we talk about MRS means marginal rate of substitution. So marginal rate of substitution is also known as what? As indifference curve, that is slope of an indifference curve. So in exam you can see it where you will be asked, you should explain the slope of an indifference curve. So it's either you call it slope of an indifference curve or you call it marginal rate of substitution, MRS. I don't talk about MRS, it's just like we are explaining diminishing what? Returns. So the MRS diminishes as one moves along the difference curve. That is, the moment there is a change in your satisfaction, or when there is a shift, let me use the word shift, that is in a situation whereby a consumer is willing to trade one good for another, that is, you are willing to to trade one good, that is to buy one goods than buying the other. Why? Because one is giving you satisfaction more than the other. Is either one is giving you lower satisfaction, the other one is giving you satisfaction, or the other one is giving you lower satisfaction, the other one is giving you. So the moment that's why I said that you can't derive the same satisfaction. It's just like Coke and Big Cola. Though the fact that they have the same taste, but people still prefer one than the other because of the satisfaction they derive from taking it. So then we also have transitivity and completeness. So this theory assumes that consumer preferences are transitive. So if the consumer prefers bundle A to bundle B and bundle B to bundle C, then the consumer also prefers bundle A to bundle C. And complete consumer can compare and rank all possible bundles. So what we are saying here is that so your satisfaction, your utility is based on your what? On your on the maximum, let me put it this way, the maximum utility you derive from taking a commodity is what determines your what? Your utility. So if you are taking a commodity, for instance, on a daily basis, and you are not deriving the satisfaction that you want, so you decide to what? To shift. You decide to what? To be transitive means you decide to what? To shift to a particular commodity that can give you the satisfaction that you demand or that you want. The another one again is our budget constraint. The consumer budget constraint that is represented by budget line. So it shows all combinations of goods that the consumer can afford given their income and the prices of the goods. The consumer chooses the combination of goods that maximize utility while staying with their budget constraint. So what we are saying is that this one is just like explaining your income. No matter your utility, your satisfaction, your income is a factor you need to consider because your income level is what determines your demand, and your utility will be based on your what? Your income. So if you say you can take 10 bottles now, fine. The question is that can you afford 10 bottles? You need to put into consideration. The another one again is the consumer equilibrium. Consumer equilibrium. Consumer equilibrium occurs where the highest possible indifference curve is tangent to the budget constraint. At this point, the consumer is maximizing utility given their budget constraint. So Inechi, please, are you with us? Clifford, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
So any question before we move on?
No question.
Clifford, are you with us? I can't hear Clifford, but I can only hear Inechi. Or Clifford is sleeping.
I'm not. My background is noisy, so I don't want to talk.
Oh, okay, okay. I want to ask a question, right? You can type it. Is it possible you
No, no,
type?
no. I don't have any question. You can continue.
Okay. So please, before we end this class, just remind that I said I want to drop a question, I think on the WhatsApp group. So I want you to attend to it.
Okay.
So probably on Monday, please. We'll be expecting the results on Monday of the statistics of indifference score. So number one is downward sloping. Downward sloping. Indifferent curve slightly slope Can you confirm that you can hear me, please? Hello, can you hear
Volume is
me?
quite low.
Oh, might be the network. I said, what is another name for marginal rate of substitution? What's another name for it? Do you get my question?
Yes, but I don't know the other name.
Okay, Clifford, what's other name for marginal rate of substitution? Okay, let me just help you out. I said another name for marginal rate of substitution is the slope along the what? The indifference curve. Please take note of that. Slope along the indifference curve is referred to as marginal rate of substitution. So, and what is marginal rate of substitution? Marginal rate of substitution, it means that consumer consumes more of one good and less of the other. Did you get that? Marginal rate of substitution means consumer consume more of one good and less of the other. So which means if you are taking two bottles of Coke, probably you are taking less of what? Of what? Of Fanta. Do you get the explanation now? So the more you take one, the less of another you take. So that is what we refer to as marginal rate of substitution. Do you get that now?
Yes.
All right, please take note of that. So then again, we also have converse to the origin. This is another word. We are talking about the key characteristics of indifference. The first one is your indifference curve slope downward from left. What you should just pick. Forget about the story. Forget about the story. Just pick one thing there. The first characteristics of indifference curve is that it slope downward from left to right. Take note of that. Number two is that indifference curve are typically converse to the origin. If I were you, I would take note of that too. So the first one is that it slope downward from left to right. Number two, indifference curve are typically they are converse to the origin. That is number two. Number three is that indifference curve cannot intersect each other. I'm going to ask all these things now. Please take note of that too. So the first one I said indifference curve slope downward from left to right. That is the first one. Number two, I said indifference curve are typically converse to the origin. That is number two. Number three, I said indifference curve cannot intersect each other. Cannot intersect each other. That is number three. Number four, a higher indifference curve represents a higher level of utility for the consumer. And lastly, we said indifference curve represents different level of utility for consumer. So indifference map, that is, it is an indifference curve that represent different level of utility. So can we go now? Inechi, what are the key characteristics of indifference curve? Number one, let's go.
It's it is converse in nature from the origin.
Okay, yeah, one more. Thank you.
It slopes downward from left to right.
Thank you very much. God bless you. Clifford, your turn. Oh, yeah, yeah. All of these are, we call it characteristics of indifference curve. So Inechi have mentioned two for us. So Clifford mentioned two for us as well. Okay, I think Clifford, he said there is noise there. So let's just move on. We said number three, indifference curve cannot intersect each other. Nature have helped us with one. She said it slopes downward from left to right. He said they are converse to the origin. Indifference curve, they cannot intersect each other. Indifference curve also represents high level of what? Utility. And also indifference curve are what? That are different, indifference curve that are different level. We call it indifference map. So indifference map are what? Are indifference curve that are at different level of utility. So let's look at equimarginal principle. So what is equimarginal principle? Equimarginal principle, also known as principle of equimarginal utility. This can also be an objective question. As small as it is here, it can be an objective question in your exam. So it can be an objective question in your exam. So we call it equimarginal principle, also known as the principle of equimarginal utility. Is a concept of economics or concept in economics used to analyze consumer behavior. It is used to analyze consumer behavior and resource allocation. Please take note of that. Equilibrium marginal principle or equimarginal principle, also known as is a concept in economics used to analyze consumer behavior and resource allocation. It states that a consumer will allocate their limited income among different goods and services in such a way that the marginal utility per dollar or naira that is spent is equal for each good or service. So this principle is talking about how consumer analyze their resources. So how they analyze their resources. Then we also look at the next slide. We have what are the key points? What are the key points about equimarginal principle? Number one is optimization. The principle suggests that consumers seek to maximize the total utility given their limited budget by allocating their resources in such a way that the marginal utility per dollar spent is equal across all goods and services. Consumers can achieve the highest possible level of satisfaction. So this principle is letting us understand that consumers can achieve the highest possible level of satisfaction having the what? The resources. So another one again is marginal utility. So under this principle, marginal utility refers to the additional satisfaction gained from consuming one more unit of a good or services. So the marginal principle focus on comparing the marginal utility of different goods relative to their prices or cost. So another one again, we also have budget constraint. I've explained that before. So we also have consumer equilibrium, which I've also explained, that is whereby your utility is equal to your what? To your budget. That is what can satisfy you is what you take. The quantity consumed is equal to the satisfaction derived. That is what we call consumer equilibrium. That is the quantity of goods that you consume is exactly the what? The satisfaction that you derive. So we also have application. The equimarginal principle can be applied in various concepts, such as what? Determining how a consumer allocate their income among different goods, how a producer allocate resources among different production process, or how a firm allocate its advertising budget among different marketing channels. Then we also have assumption. So equimarginal principle assumes that consumers have complete information about prices and the utility they derive from consuming different goods, as well as they can freely allocate their resources without any transaction cost. Then we also have what the differences between budget line and indifference curve. Please let's take note of this particular slide. So what are the differences between budget line and indifference curve? The budget line and indifference curves are both graphical tools used in microeconomics to analyze behavior, consumer behavior and decision making. So we use the budget line and indifference curve to analyze consumer behavior and to make decisions too. However, they represent different aspects of consumer choice and have distinct characteristics. Here are the key differences between the budget line and indifference curves. Please take note of this particular slide. This question, take note of, write today's date down. This question will come out in your theory part. So just take note of what I just said now. Don't take it as a joke. You will be asked to differentiate between budget line and indifference curve. So the first one, you are differentiating it, you need to put heading. So the first one is that budget line. The budget line represents the various combinations of two goods that the consumer can afford to consumer. So one is focusing on the income and the price, while the other one is focusing on the level of satisfaction. That is the first one. I said, don't mind my network. We are almost rounding off. We're almost rounding off. Please, can you hear me? We're almost rounding off.
Yes, I can hear you.
So don't worry, I'm going to drop I will try and drop questions. Then
Hope is not my own network o, because I've been waiting since.
No, it's not.
Okay.